Hello and welcome to the very first session of the Triton Talks webinar series. We're so excited for you all to be here. You'll be hearing about the Triton Initiative today from PNNL's Alicia Amerson and Joseph Haxel, as well as from our sponsor, Samantha Eaves from the Department of Energy, Water Power Technologies Office. A few logistical notes for our attendees. We are using a Zoom webinar setup, which means that we've muted you to ensure that there are no interruptions during the presentation. If you do have questions that come up during the webinar, please feel free to address them to our speakers by putting them into the chat, and then I'll read them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We'll also be including helpful links to materials presented in the webinar in the chat, so keep your eye out for those. And this webinar is being recorded. We'll be posting it later on YouTube if you want to reference it later or to share it with others. With that, I will let our speakers give a brief introduction of themselves before we dive into Triton's recent research efforts.
Thank you, Nalani. Hello, everybody. I am Alicia Amerson, the Triton Initiative Project Manager. I'm a marine biologist and certified PMP with a curiosity in exploring boundaries where the human dimension, wildlife, and wild places merge together, especially as it relates to marine and coastal environments and marine energy. Pass it off to Joe.
Thanks, Alicia. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Haxel, and I'm the principal investigator for the Triton Initiative at PNNL. I've been involved in environmental monitoring around marine energy for about 10 years, and my background is in ocean acoustics. Prior to joining PNNL, I was at Oregon State University, where I helped develop the environmental monitoring plans and supported permitting efforts for the Packway Wave Energy Testing Facility. I'll pass it to Sam.
All right, thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Eaves with Allegheny Science and Technology in support of the Department of Energy's Water Power Technologies Office, where I've been for the past 8 years, and I manage the environmental and regulatory work that WPTO funds for marine energy. So just as a little bit of background on Triton, the Triton Initiative was established in 2015 by the U.S. Department of Energy's Water Power Technologies Office at Pacific Northwest National Laboratories Marine and Coastal Research Laboratory, or MACRL, in order to provide an objective third-party facility where new monitoring technologies that were produced from DOE-sponsored funding opportunities could be tested and evaluated. Since it was established, Triton has provided testing and technical support for 11 different DOE-funded projects. Then in 2018, the scope of Triton was expanded to address a problem in the marine energy field where there are no industry standards for the collection of environmental data around marine energy installations. And this has led to the use of a wide variety of methodologies and technologies. And as a result, it's often difficult to utilize the data that's been collected from one location or device type to inform the potential risks that are associated with a new energy installation. So to address this limitation, Triton Field Trials or TFIT was created. And the overarching objective of TFIT is to address this lack of environmental monitoring standards for marine energy by evaluating different technologies and methodologies for the monitoring of common environmental concerns, and then providing recommendations that can be used by the marine energy industry. Since this is a rather large scope, in order to refine this a little bit, first, the activities performed under TFIT, there were 3 main areas. First, we identified priority environmental concerns for the marine energy industry by leveraging the work of OES Environmental, which is another project at PNNL. From this, the TFIT activities were focused on changes in habitat, collision risk, electromagnetic fields, and underwater noise. Second, for each environmental concern, we then identified promising environmental monitoring technologies through extensive literature reviews and also consultation with subject matter experts. Third, we identified sites to conduct field testing that were representative of locations where marine energy devices might be deployed. Through all these scoping activities, we evaluated technologies and methodologies at 5 different field sites, Collision risk technologies were tested around a turbine that was deployed at the Tanana River test site in Alaska. EMF technologies were evaluated in Squim Bay Channel in Washington. Collision risk changes in habitat and underwater noise technologies were tested in Squim Bay in Washington. Collision risk and underwater noise technologies were tested around a turbine at the Portsmouth Memorial Bridge in New Hampshire. And changes in habitat and underwater noise were evaluated around a wave energy converter that was deployed at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California. In addition to the field component, TFIT also addressed predictive modeling options for each of these environmental concerns and included a science communication component.
Thank you, Sam. So the Triton Initiative is headquartered at the Marine and Coastal Research Lab. We also call this lab Mackerel affectionately, the lab by the sea. This is one of the PNNL campuses located in Squim, Washington, and is on the Upper Peninsula west of Seattle. This is DOE's only marine laboratory, and we are a world-class laboratory working in all areas of ocean science, from powering the blue economy, carbon sequestration, marine bioenergy and fuels, eelgrass restoration, and of course, marine energy. So marine energy devices are advancing rapidly, and developers of these devices need places to test. And the Triton Talks series is in line with promoting this effort. And we have scientifically proven field-tested environmental monitoring results to aid the testing of wave energy and tidal energy converters, as Sam discussed. And through the Triton Talks webinar series, our researchers in the 4 stressor areas, changes in habitat, collision risk, electromagnetic fields, and underwater noise, will talk about more specifically the technologies and methods that they field tested to understand marine energy devices and the impact they may have operating in specific habitats. So each month, starting this month until October, you'll hear from a Triton researcher and about their research in a 30-minute webinar, followed by a Q&A session. So the results of this research are, do you want to go to the next slide, please, Nalani? The results of this research are published as a set of recommendations on how to use environmental monitoring technologies and methods to better address the 4 stressors. These recommendations can be found in the Journal of Marine Science and Engineering. The special issue is a series of 10 articles that discuss the environmental monitoring technologies, methods, science communication efforts, and modeling requirements to help us better understand impacts of marine energy and the data collection necessary for informing permitting needs. We also, in this journal, we have produced a paper on a new stressor associated with anthropogenic light. And at the end of this special issue, we present a perspective piece that includes the importance of addressing timing of marine energy environmental monitoring campaigns, energy sustainability, and life cycle assessments, along with next steps for the industry. So here are the 10 articles that you can find in the Journal of Marine Science and Engineering special issue. Now I'll turn the show over to Joe.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. I'd also like to mention that in addition to the scheduled presentations in this webinar series that Alicia spoke about, we're also co-hosting a session at the upcoming virtual International Ocean Sciences meeting on March 3rd of this year, 2022, in the Ocean Technology section, OT15. The session titled Measuring, Modeling, and Mitigating Environmental Effects of Ocean Renewable Energy will include presentations focused on offshore renewable energy development and environmental research that links monitoring data, modeling, effects of energy removal on water bodies, and linking engineering designs that can help mitigate potentially harmful environmental effects. So several of the researchers you'll hear about next will be presenting in their technical areas at the conference, and we encourage you to join the OT 15 sessions if you plan on attending the Ocean Sciences meeting later this month. So back to the upcoming Triton webinars. Several of the team members I mentioned in the previous slides will be presenting a deep dive into their stressor or topic area during the upcoming individually focused webinar series presentations. In these talks, they'll be highlighting the research and recommendations that are included in the JMSC special issue publications. So next, let's briefly visit each of these Triton team members in the next couple of slides to give you a preview of their upcoming webinars. So first up next month in March is a webinar presented by Kate Bonneau, looking at predictive modeling and evaluating the availability and maturity of numerical models that can be used to inform environmental effects for marine energy projects. Kate will share her recommendations for model selection and the data necessary for model validation and what it takes to produce meaningful modeling results. The Triton Communications webinar in April will be presented by Kayleen Gunn, and we'll dive into Triton's communications framework that was launched in FY21. This framework for conducting communications and outreach for Triton involves several channels of communication to connect with researchers, research partners, and our key stakeholders in the marine energy industry, and effectively disseminate these results and research findings. In her webinar, Kayleen will talk about the JMSE special issue paper, which dives into these strategies, successes, and lessons that have been learned from the first year of implementing Triton's communications framework. The next webinar in the series will be presented by Molly Greer in May. It's focusing on electromagnetic fields, commonly referred to as EMF. Marine energy cables that transmit electricity back to shore can generate EMFs, which can create barriers or attract animals that are sensitive to magnetic fields. Molly will present her research and her recommendations for instrumentation and methods for measuring magnetic fields at a tidal energy site in the Swim Bay Channel in the state of Washington. Garrett Staines will present the webinar on collision risk in June, focusing on concerns for fish being struck by turbine blades. Garrett will cover the types of equipment recommended for monitoring in clear water sites with optical video cameras versus turbid water areas, which require advanced acoustic camera technologies. In his presentation, he'll lead us through testing an acoustic camera at a turbine in a high turbidity riverine environment on the Tanana River in Alaska. In the July webinar, I will talk about underwater noise monitoring and putting the recent International Electrotechnical Commission 62600-40 technical specification to work at the University of New Hampshire's Living Bridge tidal turbine project. The IEC-40 technical specification that was released in 2019 provides guidance for standardized measurement and characterization of marine energy converters, but it has received little use in the US due to a lack of marine energy converter deployments. In this webinar, I'll talk through our use case and application of the IEC-40 at the UNH Living Bridge and follow up with further recommendations for measuring and monitoring underwater noise at current energy converter project sites. The changes in habitat monitoring webinar in August will be presented by Lynette Emery, and focuses on identifying sampling technologies that will bring the most consistent results for monitoring marine systems where marine energy devices are deployed. After discussions with several subject matter experts about various technologies, Lynette's team decided a thorough literature review was needed to catalog the diversity of technologies available for monitoring benthic and pelagic habitats. This review provides a framework for selecting monitoring technologies for best results at wave and energy tidal sites. Applying this framework, the team tested a 360-degree underwater camera to monitor the artificial reef effect of a wave energy device deployed off Southern California to observe fish and other animals that aggregate around the anchors. From these desktop and field studies, the team compiled recommendations on technologies to use for monitoring changes in habitat at wave and tidal energy sites.
Thank you, Joe, for presenting our webinars and the information. So I want to invite all of you to connect with us and connect with the Triton team. Nolani and Kayleen are busy on the side here putting links to everything that's upcoming from our JMSC special issue, the Ocean Science Conference, and our special session, the Triton Webinar Talks. Predictive modeling webinar next month with Kate. So I hope that you will join us there. You can also find out more about Triton at the website here, pnnl.gov/projects/Triton. We invite you to join our monthly newsletter if you haven't already. You can also find out more about the Triton researchers and our research on the Triton Stories blog, which is connected in our website. And please feel free to email us anytime that you have a question, you want to connect, or just want to share a thought about marine energy or environmental monitoring. We're really excited to connect with you. And with that, I'll hand the final slide off to Sam.
Great, thank you, Alicia. Thanks, Joe. So the overarching goal of Triton's research is to support the advancement of the marine energy industry by improving the performance and reducing costs associated with environmental monitoring technologies that are ultimately needed to address regulatory concerns and requirements. And the success and impact of Triton's work is dependent upon stakeholders being aware of the ongoing work and also having an opportunity to use these products. We thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. And with that, we would like to open the webinar up to questions. I believe we'll be taking questions in the chat function, and then Nolani will be reading the questions out. All right, thank you.
So as Sam said, if you do have a question that comes up, you can put it in the chat right now. And we do have one to start off with, a question that was pulled up earlier. Looking forward, what do you plan? Oh, so I'm sorry, I'm moving screens. What projects are you looking forward to and working on with the Triton project? I think anyone who is feels ready to field that question, please do.
Yeah, the Triton Initiative is moving into understanding receptors and the receptor response to the stressors that we're presenting in this webinar series. So we have a portfolio of projects that are occurring over the next 3 years to address species such as crabs and whales. And also we're moving further into our research with anthropogenic light and different types of technologies to better understand the responses of these receptors, such as a tethered balloon and particle motion.
Thanks, Alicia. We have another question. What was the biggest challenge the team faced during the field trials? Did you overcome this challenge?
I can jump in there on that one. I would say one of the largest challenges we had was delays, was just scheduling, was really challenging. You know, this work is tied around the deployments of the devices, and so slips in schedule for those affect our work as well. So we had to really remain flexible and really, you know, try to be able to accommodate all kinds of changes in schedule and what things need to happen. So I think that was, you know, from my perspective, one of the larger challenges we really had to address.
I haven't seen other questions come into the chat, but we do have another one. What most excites you about Triton's environmental monitoring recommendations? And what aspect of the field trials do you think is the most valuable?
So just from a higher level, I would say putting forward recommendations that can be adopted by the larger marine energy community is really important and will enable kind of the aggregation and the collection of a larger data set to demonstrate the actual risk of some of these environmental concerns that are posed by marine energy devices, so that we can build up this knowledge base that can be used by future deployments to actually inform whether or not these environmental concerns are a legitimate risk and things that need to be monitored for, or things that may not be rise to the higher priority for monitoring. And I think what was really important about the Triton field trials is our researchers had the opportunity to go out into the field setting, evaluate how well these different monitoring technologies performed at a variety of different environments, because within marine energy, there's a wide array of environments where we might have devices deployed. And so, there might not be a one-size-fits-all approach for environmental monitoring, but by testing these out in a variety of different systems, we're trying to get at what is the best approach for the majority of systems.
Thanks, Sam. We have a question that came up in the chat from Sarah. Does anyone have advice for someone who is interested in joining projects such as Triton? I love everything you're doing. Well, we all appreciate that comment. Thank you.
I think there's a lot of ways to get involved, really depending on where you're at in your career. There's internships with DOE. Sometimes there's research assistant positions open at PNNL. So it really depends on where you're at in your career. And then every once in a while, there's positions open for full-time staff. So it's really just kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of working at PNNL and looking at that careers page. And then also, I think if you are very interested in working in these projects, thinking of different companies that are working. I know there's a few of the developers of environmental monitoring technologies and marine energy devices on this call. So connecting with those folks, we just recently put out last month in January, partners who we partner with, Triton Story. And you can see some of the people that we work with outside of PNNL. And I'm sure a lot of those people would be very interested in learning more about you and your skill set and how you might be able to help them advance. So connecting with people that we're connecting with is always a great way. And then if you are at university, looking to see what marine energy programs and classes are offered to you. And if they're not specific to marine energy, what's the closest thing that you can find to study? So those are a few suggestions. I don't, Joe, Sam, do you have some more suggestions?
I would just build off of that. I think part of the strength of Triton that we've worked to build is our partnerships, and really the work that we do, we couldn't get done without the collaborations that we have with the industry, academia, even other labs. So that is really a key component. And so I think, as Alicia mentioned, a lot of those different pathways are ways to sort of connect in the industry and in this field. Maybe not directly with Triton, as a Triton staff member, but certainly we're very open to collaboration and partnership.
Yeah, I would just echo everything that Alicia and Joe have said, and just kind of keep your eyes out for, again, depending on where you are in your career, the internship opportunities, or sometimes there are job opportunities that arise, and looking at all of the different partnerships that are already existing between Triton researchers and universities and other private companies.
Thanks for your input on all of those. And we do really appreciate questions. This is a great opportunity to talk with some of Triton's great staff. So please do take advantage of the chat. And then Kayleen also dropped a link for the stories. She does a wonderful job with publishing what's going on with Triton. I highly recommend following these. They come out every month and reading through, and that will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on. And it's just great writing. So please follow that link. We have another question. What information do you want from marine energy stakeholders to help inform your research?
I think to address one of the challenges that Joe was talking about is timing. And just there's due to a global pandemic and shipping and availability to get products that we need, there's been significant delays. And so I think being able to work closely with our collaborators on deployments is really important. So I think one thing, just working really closely, keeping communications open and helping to move towards testing the devices and providing environmental monitoring around devices that are going into the water and promoting and being an advocate for those devices as we move forward in our testing efforts. So I think that's one area.
Yeah, and I would add, even in another area is maybe, early information in the design phase of the devices, potentially, sharing that and be able to have a look at that from an environmental perspective and potentially help developers, with respect to design to head off any potential environmental challenges that they might see, as they move their design through all the phases, to build and deployment. So if we can plug in a little bit early and maybe help inform the design from an environmental perspective, that could be a helpful thing for the industry.
I guess from another perspective, if you are like a regulator or someone collecting environmental data, knowing exactly what your data needs are, the type of data you need, the format, to meet specific requirements that you are charged with enforcing. And so once we know that type of information and we're putting forward these recommendations for environmental monitoring instrumentation or methodologies, then getting feedback on whether or not these recommendations would actually meet the needs of what you need to do your job. And if there are pieces missing, letting us know what those pieces missing are is really important.
Okay, we are at 11:31, and if you don't mind, please follow the survey. If you don't mind adding the link to the survey in the chat, please take 5 minutes to complete this. We would love to receive your feedback so that we can make this even better for next time. Speaking of which, on March 17th, we mentioned that we'll be having our next webinar, and we have the registration link in the chat. So please do register for that, and we hope to see you there. If you have any remaining questions, send them to us and we'll do our best to answer them. Yeah, I think that's it for all of us, unless there are any remaining comments you'd like to say to everybody.
Thank you for attending, and thank you Nolani, Sarah, and Kayleen for moderating, and it's always fun working with Sam and Joe. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks everyone. We'll be stopping the recording now. See you next time.